The camera pans over a bustling office building in the heart of downtown Chicago, the sun dipping beneath the horizon as the clock strikes 6 p.m. Inside, a virtual meeting is underway, the faces of employees framed in neat rectangles on a computer screen. The CEO, Daniel Hartman, pauses mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing slightly as he focuses on one particular screen. There, in the lower corner, sits an intern, a young woman with strikingly familiar features. Her name tag reads Emily Carter, but Daniel's mind races back to a different name, a different time, a missing child from the late 90s. His heart skips a beat. Could it be her? Rewind to a small town in Oregon, circa 1998, a place framed by rolling hills and dense forests. The air is crisp in the early morning light, children are playing in the neighborhood park, and laughter echoes down the quiet streets. Among them is a bright-eyed 6-year-old girl named Lily Thompson. Lily is the kind of child who lights up a room with her smile, her curious nature leading her to explore every corner of her world. Her parents, Jane and Robert Thompson, dote on her, their only child, their sunshine. Life in the Thompson household is warm and loving, filled with bedtime stories and weekend picnics. Jane is a schoolteacher, nurturing not only Lily but the children in her classroom. Robert, a local mechanic, is known for his kindness and generosity. They are a picture of happiness and stability. But everything changes on the morning of June 14, 1998. The day starts like any other, with Lily excitedly preparing for a day at the local summer camp. Jane packs her a lunch, while Robert ties her shoes, gently reminding her to be careful and have fun. They wave goodbye as Lily skips down the driveway, her backpack bouncing with each step. Hours later, a chilling silence falls over the town as the news spreads. Lily never arrived at camp. Panic sets in as teachers and parents scramble to locate the missing girl. The Thompsons, frantic and desperate, call the police, their voices trembling as they report their daughter missing. The initial investigation unfolds with urgency, the local police combing the area, questioning neighbors and setting up roadblocks. But as days turn into weeks, hope begins to dwindle. The community rallies around the Thompsons, their support unwavering. But the search yields nothing. No witnesses, no leads, no trace of the little girl who once brought so much joy. The case grows cold, leaving a permanent scar on the town and a family shattered by the unknown. Back in the present, Daniel Hartman's mind races with questions. Could Emily Carter be the missing Lily Thompson? And if so, how did she end up here living a life under a different name? As the meeting draws to a close, Daniel knows he must find answers. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, desperate to uncover the truth behind this decades-old mystery. The screen illuminates once more, pulling us back into the somber morning of June 14, 1998. The Thompsons' living room is a flurry of movement and emotion. Jane clutches the phone, her voice cracking as she pleads for help. Robert stands nearby, his knuckles white as he grips the arm of a chair, trying to steady himself against the storm of fear crashing over him. The first responders arrive with haste, their radios crackling with instructions as they fan out across the neighborhood. Detective Laura Mendez, a seasoned officer with a reputation for leaving no stone unturned, leads the effort. Her eyes are sharp, taking in every detail as she speaks with the distraught parents. She reassures them with a calm authority, promising they will do everything in their power to bring Lily home. Meanwhile, neighbors gather in hushed clusters, exchanging worried glances and whispered speculations. Mrs. Abernathy, an elderly woman who lives across the street, recounts seeing a blue sedan idling near the Thompsons' house that morning. Her testimony seems promising, a potential lead in the early hours of the search. But as the day progresses, the investigation hits its first stumbling blocks. The blue sedan, tracked down based on Mrs. Abernathy's description, turns out to belong to a delivery driver with a solid alibi. The roadblocks yield nothing but frustrated drivers and frayed tempers. Inside the police station, the atmosphere is tense. Maps of the area are spread across desks, marked with red ink where officers have already searched. Detective Mendez paces back and forth, her mind racing to piece together any semblance of a trail. She knows that the first 48 hours are critical, the window in which most missing children are found, or lost forever. The Thompsons, engulfed in a nightmare they can't wake from, find solace only in the presence of friends and family who fill their home. Jane's sister, Evelyn, offers quiet comfort, while Robert's brother, Mike, organizes search parties, eager to do anything that might help. But amidst the chaos, crucial mistakes are made. The initial canvassing of the neighborhood is rushed, with officers overlooking potential witnesses who might have seen something vital. A report of a suspicious vehicle near the summer camp is filed late, buried under a pile of paperwork, and an anonymous tip received through the hotline is misplaced, its significance lost until it's too late. As night falls, the weight of uncertainty bears down on everyone involved. Detective Mendez, weary but determined, watches the sun dip below the horizon, knowing that time is slipping away. The urgency of the first day bleeds into the next, and hope begins to wane. Back in the present, Daniel Hartman sits alone in his office, the glow of his computer screen illuminating his face. A quick search reveals the details of Lily Thompson's disappearance, the unsolved case that haunted a town and devastated a family. The resemblance between Lily's childhood photos and Emily Carter is uncanny, too striking to ignore. His mind swirls with possibilities and doubts. Could he really have stumbled upon the key to a mystery that had baffled detectives for decades? And if Emily is indeed Lily, how did she come to be here, living a life she doesn't remember? The questions gnaw at him, demanding answers. As the clock ticks past midnight, Daniel makes a decision. He reaches for his phone, dialing a number he's memorized from the files. The line rings once, twice before a voice answers on the other end. Detective Laura Mendez, now retired but still haunted by the case, listens intently as Daniel explains the situation. Her voice, though older now, carries the same resolve it had decades ago. Together, they vow to uncover the truth, to finally bring closure to a case that had remained cold for far too long. The screen fades to black once more, leaving viewers on the edge of their seats, eager to follow the trail of clues and revelations that lie ahead. The early morning sun casts a pale light over the small town of Maplewood, still reeling from the shock of Lily Thompson's disappearance. The local police department, unaccustomed to handling such high-stakes cases, scrambles to assemble a team. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere is tense, a mix of urgency and disarray. Detective Mendez, at that time a fresh face with a reputation for dogged determination, stands at the helm. Her eyes scan the room, landing on officers who are both eager to help and overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation. She knows the first 48 hours are critical, the window swiftly closing with every passing moment. Outside, reporters gather like vultures, their cameras aimed at the entrance. The Thompson family, distraught and visibly shaken, arrives at the station. Thompson clutches a worn photograph of Lily, her face a mask of desperation. Mr. Thompson, his jaw set in grim determination, recounts the events leading up to Lily's disappearance, the summer camp, the canoe trip, the moment they realized she was missing. Back at the precinct, Detective Mendez divides the team, assigning officers to canvass the area around the camp and interview potential witnesses. Yet, amidst the chaos, critical errors begin to unfold. The report of the suspicious vehicle, a lead that could have been pivotal, is mishandled. Officer Stevens, tasked with following up on the vehicle, misfiles the report, mistakenly lumping it with minor traffic violations. Meanwhile, the anonymous tip, a call that had come in during the initial hours, is dismissed as a prank. The operator, overwhelmed and inexperienced, fails to recognize the urgency in the caller's voice. The detail slips through the cracks, lost in the sea of mounting paperwork. In the Thompson household, the phone rings incessantly. Friends, family, and well-wishers offer their support, but their words do little to soothe the growing fear. Neighbors gather, organizing search parties, their flashlights cutting through the dense woods around the camp. Yet, as day turns to night, the reality sets in. A child is missing, and the community stands on the brink of despair. Detective Mendez, weary but relentless, pores over the scant evidence gathered. Her frustration mounts as the hours tick by, precious time slipping away. She shares her concerns with Sergeant Lewis, hoping for a breakthrough, but he too is at a loss. "We've got nothing concrete," he admits, his voice laced with frustration. In the present, As Daniel Hartman listens, he realizes the magnitude of what Detective Mendez and the town were up against. The mistakes, though unintended, had dire consequences, leading to years of unanswered questions and lingering heartache. Detective Mendez's voice, now softer with age but no less resolute, breaks through his thoughts. "We need to retrace our steps, Daniel. Look at everything we missed back then." Her resolve reignites the same in him, and together they begin to piece together the puzzle that had eluded everyone for so long. As viewers are drawn into the narrative, they are left with a burning question. What crucial piece of evidence was overlooked in those early hours, and how will it tie into the startling revelation in the present day? The screen fades to black, leaving the audience eager for the next chapter in this unfolding mystery. The morning sun casts a pale light over the town, a stark contrast to the darkness that has enveloped the Thompson family. In the police station, Detective Mendez sits with a cup of coffee growing cold in her hands, her mind racing through every detail they have, or rather, don't have. The first 48 hours are crucial, she knows, and the clock is ticking. Back at the Thompson household, the atmosphere is tense, a palpable fear hanging in the air. Mrs. Thompson's eyes are red-rimmed, her voice hoarse from calling out for her daughter. She clutches a faded photograph, a snapshot of happier times, as if willing her child back into existence. Mr. Thompson is on the phone, again speaking to an officer, his voice a mix of desperation and anger. "What do you mean there's no new information?" he asks, frustration seeping into every word. Across town, the local diner is buzzing with speculation. The regulars, each with their own theory, exchange whispers over coffee cups. Some recall seeing a stranger in town. Others mention the white van rumored to have been seen near the camp. But all these are just threads of gossip, none substantial enough to weave into a coherent picture. Detective Mendez knows she needs more than hearsay. She needs facts. She refocuses on the statements from the camp counselors, piecing together the timeline of the disappearance. One counselor recalls seeing Emily, the missing child, talking to a man near the edge of the woods. His description is vague, but something about it nags at Mendez, a detail she can't quite grasp. The early missteps in the investigation haunt her. The dismissed anonymous call, the overlooked tire tracks near the camp, the missing footage from a nearby gas station's security camera, all small oversights. But in a case this fragile, each one could spell the difference between hope and despair. Meanwhile, the Thompson family is rallying the community. Flyers are printed and distributed, the smiling face of Emily staring back at passers-by from telephone poles and shop windows. The town's radio station broadcasts alerts, urging anyone with information to come forward. Yet, as day turns to night, the sense of urgency escalates, the fear of what might have happened growing heavier with each passing hour. Back at the station, Sergeant Lewis approaches Mendez with a new lead. A woman from the neighboring town claims to have seen a child matching Emily's description being led into a car. It's a thin lead, but it's something. Mendez takes a deep breath, determination etched on her face. "We'll follow every lead, no matter how small," she insists, her voice firm. As the episode draws to a close, the camera pans over the bustling police station, the tension palpable. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with a lingering question. Will this new lead unravel the mystery, or will it be another dead end in a case that is already slipping through their fingers? The investigation resumes with a new sense of urgency. Detective Mendez, fueled by hope and desperation, follows the tip to the neighboring town. The woman who reported the sighting is eager to help, but her recollection is hazy. She remembers the car, a rusty sedan, maroon maybe, and a man with a baseball cap, but little else. The team scours records for any registered vehicles fitting the description, but it's a daunting task. Thousands of cars match, and each needs to be checked. Frustration begins to brew as the days tick by with no progress. Rumors start to circulate through the community. Whispers in coffee shops and at church gatherings speculate about who in town could be hiding secrets. Some point fingers at local eccentric Mr. Jenkins, whose reclusive nature and peculiar behavior make him an easy target for suspicion. But those who know him well dismiss the notion as ridiculous. Others speculate about transient workers who had been seen around the campgrounds. These rumors, though unfounded, add layers of complexity to an already tangled investigation. Detective Mendez knows she must tread carefully, wary of the damage that baseless accusations could cause. Meanwhile, the Thompson family struggles under the weight of uncertainty. Emily's parents, once hopeful, now seem hollowed out by the relentless passage of time. Her mother clings to the phone, jumping at every ring, her heart breaking a little more with each false alarm. As the investigation stalls, pressure mounts on the police department. The media, initially sympathetic, begins to question the competence of the local authorities. Headlines speculate on whether critical early mistakes have doomed any chance of finding Emily. Sergeant Lewis, feeling the heat, pushes for progress. He orders a re-examination of the initial crime scene, hoping that a fresh perspective might yield clues that were missed in the chaos of those first frantic days. But the passage of time has erased many traces, and what remains feels like echoes of possibilities, elusive and uncertain. Behind closed doors, tensions within the investigative team simmer. Some argue for pursuing the Jenkins lead more aggressively, while others insist on focusing on the transient workers. Mendez, caught in the middle, insists on a balanced approach, aware that time is slipping away. An air of desperation hangs over the station. Each day that ends without a breakthrough feels like a step closer to the case going cold. Mendez spends long nights reviewing case files, her mind refusing to rest. She's haunted by Emily's face and the nagging feeling that she's missing something crucial. Just as hope begins to wane, a new whisper reaches the team. A retired schoolteacher, long since forgotten by the town, claims she saw something unusual the morning Emily disappeared. Her words, though vague, inject a sliver of possibility into the investigation, a renewed sense of direction. As this part of the narrative closes, viewers are left with the unsettling question: is this new testimony the key to unlocking the truth, or merely another mirage in a desert of dead ends? The screen fades to black, the sense of suspense thick and relentless. The retired schoolteacher's testimony, though faint and fractured by the passage of years, sends ripples through the investigation. She recalls a van parked near the school that morning, unfamiliar and out of place. Her description is hazy, blue or maybe green, she can't quite recall, but it's enough to reinvigorate the team, a thread of hope in a tapestry of despair. Sergeant Lewis calls a meeting, the room charged with a renewed sense of urgency. They pore over old witness statements, searching for any mention of a similar vehicle. But memory is a fickle thing, and the trail is cold. Mendez, though, refuses to let go. She orders a review of traffic camera footage from the area, hoping to spot the elusive van. Days turn into weeks, each moment stretching the patience of the community and the families involved. The media, ever hungry for a new angle, swarms around the schoolteacher's claim. Headlines speculate wildly, and a local news channel features an artist's sketch of the van, cobbled together from vague recollections and community input. With the renewed publicity, calls flood into the tip line. Most are dead ends, the usual gallery of cranks and attention seekers, but one stands out. A man claims his neighbor, a mechanic with a spotty past, drove a van similar to the one described. The team investigates, but the lead fizzles when the mechanic produces a solid alibi. His van accounted for miles away on the day of Emily's disappearance. Rumors begin to swirl, each more outlandish than the last. A shadow of suspicion falls on the Jenkins family again, their every move scrutinized by a town desperate for resolution. A group of teenagers overheard in a diner spins tales of secret cults and dark rituals, feeding the community's growing unease. Despite the noise, the investigation struggles to gain momentum. The van remains elusive, and the schoolteacher's testimony, once a beacon of hope, dims under the weight of doubt. The case teeters on the edge of obscurity, whispers of its coldness spreading like a chill through the precinct. But Mendez, dogged and determined, refuses to let the case slip away. She takes to the archives, digging through old records of transient workers and itinerant laborers, convinced that the answer lies buried in the forgotten margins of the town's history. The narrative closes with a sense of mounting desperation. As the screen fades to black, viewers are left with the haunting question: can Mendez's relentless pursuit of truth breathe life into a case suffocating under the weight of time, or is she chasing shadows in a landscape of uncertainty? Mendez sits alone in the dimly lit archive room, surrounded by boxes of yellowed records and dust motes that dance in the shafts of afternoon light. Her fingers, smudged with ink, turn the fragile pages of forgotten documents. It's a silent, tedious task, but her resolve is unyielding. Somewhere in these stacks lies a thread that could unravel the mystery of Emily's disappearance. Each document she reads is a step further into the past, a journey through names and dates that have long since faded from memory. The precinct is quieter now, the initial flurry of activity and hope having ebbed into a listless routine. The community, once galvanized by the renewed investigation, has begun to turn its attention back to the rhythms of everyday life. The case, once a bright flame, is now a flickering candle in the minds of the townsfolk. In the corridors of the police station, conversations turn to other matters. The Jenkins family, still under a cloud of suspicion, retreats into themselves, their windows shuttered against the prying eyes of neighbors. Emily's parents, weary from years of speculation and heartache, cling to the slivers of hope that Mendez's inquiries might yield. Mendez's persistence, however, begins to yield its first glimmers of possibility. Among the pages of laborer rosters and transient worker lists, a name keeps reappearing: Ralph Connolly. A drifter with a penchant for vanishing and reappearing across state lines, Connolly's presence in the town coincides with the timeline of Emily's disappearance. It's a tenuous link, but it's enough to pull at the strands of Mendez's curiosity. As she delves deeper, whispers of Connolly's past begin to surface. A former carnival worker, known for his quick temper and a tendency to leave towns just as swiftly as he arrived. Rumors paint a picture of a man who knows how to blend in, to become invisible in a crowd. But rumor, Mendez knows, is a double-edged sword. It can guide an investigation or lead it astray. The precinct buzzes with the news of Mendez's find. Connolly becomes the next focal point in the case, a name that ignites new theories and conjectures. The community, hungry for resolution, seizes upon this potential suspect with the fervor of those desperate for closure. Yet as quickly as Connolly emerges, he slips away again, a ghost in the annals of the investigation. Mendez's colleagues are skeptical. They've seen the case turn cold before, and they fear another dead end. But as she sits amidst the archives, Mendez's intuition tells her that Connolly is more than just a name on a page. There's something in the pattern of his movements, the way he appears and disappears, that resonates with her. Yet, for all her determination, tangible evidence remains elusive. Connolly's trail is marked by empty spaces and unanswered questions. The investigation hits a wall, the momentum stalls, and once again, the specter of a cold case looms large. Despite the setbacks, Mendez's resolve hardens. She knows that even the coldest trails can be revived, that even the faintest whispers can lead to a roar. The sun sets outside, casting long shadows across the archive room, but Mendez remains, a solitary figure against the encroaching darkness, determined to bring light to the shadows. As the episode closes, the viewer is left with a question that hangs heavy in the air. Is Ralph Connolly the key to unraveling the mystery of Emily's disappearance, or is he yet another shadow in this tangled web of uncertainty? Time has a way of eroding everything, even hope. As the years stretch into decades, Emily's case becomes a whisper in the halls of forgotten justice. The files gather dust in the precinct's archives, the pages yellowed with age, the ink fading like the memories of those who once cared. But for the Thompson family, time is a relentless reminder of absence, an unyielding echo of what was lost. Emily's parents, Sarah and Tom, refuse to let the silence swallow their daughter. They become amateur detectives, sifting through conspiracy theories and leads that often lead nowhere. Every year, on the anniversary of Emily's disappearance, they hold a vigil, a flicker of light in the darkness, drawing a dwindling crowd of supporters and curious onlookers. The community, once galvanized by the tragedy, slowly drifts back to the rhythms of everyday life, their interest waning as new stories capture their attention. In the privacy of their home, the Thompsons' grief takes on different forms. Sarah channels her pain into advocacy, becoming a voice for missing children, though each public appearance is a fresh wound, reopening the scar that never truly healed. Tom, on the other hand, retreats inward, his silence a fortress against the world. He spends hours in his garage surrounded by clippings and maps, his obsession with solving Emily's case a solitary endeavor. The town, once vibrant with the search for truth, succumbs to the inevitable pull of indifference. New families move in, unaware of the shadows that linger in the quiet corners. The old rumors and suspicions become bedtime stories, tales to chill the spine but easily dismissed with the morning light. Years blur into decades, the case files buried deeper under layers of new crimes and crises. Yet within the Thompsons' home, Emily's room remains untouched, a shrine to a life interrupted. Her posters, her bedspread, even the half-read book on her nightstand, all frozen in time, preserved by the love of parents who refuse to forget. And then, a breakthrough. Not by the hands of law enforcement, but by the relentless march of technology. DNA databases, once a futuristic concept, become a tool of the present, offering a glimmer of hope where there was none. The Thompsons submit their DNA, a last-ditch effort to find answers in a world that seems to have moved on. The narrative pauses, leaving viewers on the edge, wondering if this new technology might finally unearth the truth buried beneath years of neglect. The question looms large. Will science succeed where human endeavor has failed, and is the key to Emily's disappearance closer than anyone dared hope? The passage of time can be both a healer and a thief. For the Thompsons, it was mostly the latter. As the years stretched on, Emily's absence became a constant aching presence, like an unfinished sentence. Sarah poured herself into her advocacy work, her message a beacon of hope and warning in equal measure. She spoke at conferences, appeared on news segments, and even testified before Congress, her voice unwavering but her heart perpetually heavy. Each appearance was a reminder of her own loss, the face of her daughter reflected in every missing child's photo she held. Meanwhile, Tom's world grew quieter and smaller. The garage became his refuge, a place where he could sift through the pieces of a puzzle that never seemed to fit. He mapped out new theories, followed every whisper of a lead, and corresponded with private investigators who promised breakthroughs but delivered none. His once close relationships with friends and neighbors faded, the common ground eroded by the unsolved mystery that consumed his life. The town, too, changed. New stores opened, old landmarks were replaced, and the community's focus shifted to the latest developments and town gossip. The story of Emily Thompson became an echo, a tragic tale recounted on dark nights, but rarely invoked in daylight. The once vibrant search efforts were reduced to an annual candlelight vigil, attended by a dwindling group of devoted but weary souls. Then came the dawn of the digital age, a time of connection and innovation that promised to bridge the gaps left by time. The rise of social media offered new platforms for awareness, and the Thompsons embraced it, sharing Emily's story with a wider audience than ever before. Online forums dedicated to unsolved cases sprang up, their members poring over the details of Emily's disappearance, hoping to uncover something missed by the analog eyes of the past. It was in this digital landscape that a new hope emerged, the burgeoning field of genetic genealogy. The Thompsons, ever willing to try anything, submitted their DNA to a popular ancestry website, a seemingly small act that carried monumental potential. The process was slow and uncertain, reliant on matches that might never materialize. But it was a chance, and they clung to it. As the months passed, the Thompsons tried to temper their expectations. They had been here before, on the precipice of hope, only to be plunged back into despair. Yet the possibility loomed large, a beacon on the horizon that refused to dim. They waited, hearts in their throats, for the call that might finally bring answers. And then, one crisp autumn morning, the phone rang, a call that would set in motion events they had long imagined but never dared to fully believe. The voice on the other end spoke of a match, a distant relative, and the promise of new leads. The Thompsons, caught between disbelief and hope, leaned into the conversation, their minds racing with possibilities. The narrative lingers here, with viewers left to ponder the implications of this discovery. Could this be the breakthrough that eluded them for so long? And if so, what truths lay hidden in the shadows, waiting to be revealed? The voice on the other end continued, weaving a tapestry of possibility that held the Thompsons spellbound. It was a second cousin, living in a small town in the Midwest, who had unwittingly become a key to unlocking the past. The distant relative had no knowledge of Emily or the case, but was willing to help in any way possible. The Thompsons, buoyed by this unexpected development, worked closely with the genealogist guiding them through this uncharted territory. The process was intricate, requiring patience and precision, as they painstakingly reconstructed a family tree, each new branch offering a potential path to Emily. As they delved deeper, the Thompsons found themselves retracing steps taken long ago, revisiting old haunts and connecting with forgotten acquaintances. The community, once bustling with whispered theories and speculative chatter, had largely moved on. New families had settled, new stories had taken precedence, and Emily's disappearance had become a somber footnote in the town's history. Time had not been kind to the Thompsons. The years had etched lines of worry on their faces, their eyes carrying a depth of sorrow that only those who have lost can understand. Yet, there was a resilience within them, a quiet strength born from years of unanswered questions and relentless searching. They turned to each other as they always had, drawing strength from shared memories of Emily. Her laughter, her dreams, her spirit. It was these memories that fueled their determination, that kept them pressing forward despite the odds. Their private investigation had become a solitary pursuit, a journey that few could understand. They hired private detectives, consulted psychics, and even enlisted the help of a former FBI agent turned private investigator, each avenue explored with a flicker of hope that soon faded into disappointment. The local authorities, having exhausted their leads years ago, had relegated Emily's case to a cold case file, occasionally revisiting it with fresh eyes when new detectives joined the force. But as the years turned into decades, those eyes grew weary, the case slipping further into obscurity. Yet through it all, the Thompsons never wavered in their belief that Emily was out there, somewhere, waiting to be found. They continued to hold vigils on her birthday, placing candles in the windows, a beacon calling her home. The community, though smaller now, joined them in these moments of remembrance, a testament to the enduring impact of Emily's story. And now with this new lead, the Thompsons dared to hope once more. They imagined the moment they might finally learn what had happened to their daughter, a moment that felt both impossibly distant and tantalizingly near. The genealogist's voice pulled them back to the present, discussing the next steps, the potential for more matches, and the path forward. It was a path fraught with uncertainty, but for the first time in years, it felt promising. As they hung up the phone, the enormity of the moment settled around them. It was a beginning, the first stirrings of a new chapter in a story that had long seemed destined for a tragic end. But as the sun set on that autumn day, casting long shadows across their living room, they knew they were closer than ever to uncovering the truth, and with each passing day, the shadows of the past grew shorter, making way for the light of new revelations. Could this lead finally unravel the mystery that had haunted them for so long? And if so, what secrets would be unearthed from the depths of time? The answers lay just out of reach, waiting to be discovered. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the Thompsons awoke to a renewed sense of purpose. The genealogist's words echoed in their minds, a refrain of possibility and hope. They had spent years clinging to the memory of their daughter, but now they had something tangible, a thread to pull at, to unravel the mystery that had shadowed their lives. Meanwhile, in a bustling precinct across town, Detective Ryan Callahan, newly transferred and full of youthful determination, sifted through cold case files. He had heard whispers about the Thompson case. Emily's disappearance was infamous in local circles, and the file had been pulled out more than once over the years, only to be carefully refiled each time without resolution. But Ryan was different. He had a knack for seeing what others missed, a relentless curiosity that had often led him down paths others wouldn't tread. As he read through the file, a particular detail caught his eye. A fragment of fabric found near the playground where Emily was last seen, long dismissed as circumstantial and inconsequential. Yet with recent advancements in forensic technology, even the smallest trace could hold the key to unlocking the past. Later that morning, Ryan met with his captain, proposing they apply the latest in genetic genealogy techniques to the case. He argued that the fabric, stored in evidence all these years, might yield DNA not just from Emily but perhaps from someone else, someone who had been overlooked. The captain, initially hesitant, relented under Ryan's enthusiasm and the potential to finally bring closure to a case that had haunted their community for decades. As the wheels of the investigation began to turn once more, a retired detective, Tom Hargrove, lay in a hospital bed, his breath shallow and labored. His mind drifted through memories clouded by time and regret, settling on a moment he'd buried deep within his conscience, a sighting of a suspicious figure in the park on that fateful day. It was a detail he had dismissed back then, a decision that now weighed heavily upon him. Knowing his time was short, he called for his family, and through gasps and pauses, he confessed his oversight. His words, though fragmented, were enough to stir interest, a description vague but potentially invaluable that could point towards someone overlooked in the original investigation. As Detective Callahan prepared to send the fabric for analysis, he received a call from the hospital. The revelation from Hargrove, though unexpected, added another layer to the case. The description matched a man who had volunteered at local events during that time, a man who had slipped through the cracks of the investigation. In a quiet office, the genealogist continued her work, her focus unwavering. Each new match, each new piece of data, brought them closer to understanding not just what happened to Emily, but who she might have become. The technology was cutting edge, and while the process was slow, it was precise, revealing connections that had been invisible for far too long. As these disparate threads began to converge, the Thompsons felt a shift, a glimmer of hope that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The truth was coming into focus, yet the questions remained daunting. What would they find when all was revealed? Would the answers bring peace, or would they unearth deeper wounds? And most importantly, would they finally come face to face with the person who had taken their daughter from them all those years ago? The stage was set for revelations, and as the pieces of the puzzle came together, the Thompsons braced for the truth that lay ahead, knowing that each step forward brought them closer to the moment they had both longed for and feared. In the dimly lit office of the genealogist, a soft chime echoed, a notification of a potential match. She leaned closer to the screen, her eyes scanning the data with an intensity born from years of meticulous work. This match was different. It carried with it the promise of answers that had eluded investigators for decades, a familial link, tenuous yet undeniable, to a lineage that had been hidden in plain sight. Meanwhile, Detective Callahan, now invigorated by the recent developments, found himself in the archives, sifting through mountains of neglected evidence. Each box held the weight of history, the whisper of a story untold. As he meticulously catalogued each item, his phone buzzed. A message from the genealogist. The match was confirmed, and it pointed to someone unexpected, someone connected to the very community that had rallied around the Thompsons all those years ago. With renewed purpose, Callahan reached out to the new detective assigned to the reopened case. Detective Harper was known for her tenacity and innovative approach to cold cases. She had made headlines recently for cracking a seemingly unsolvable mystery using groundbreaking forensic techniques. Her reputation preceded her, and as Callahan briefed her on the latest developments, he felt a rare sense of optimism. Harper, with her keen analytical mind, immediately saw the potential. The genetic link was a breakthrough, but it was just one piece of the puzzle. She knew they needed more, a corroborating confession perhaps, or physical evidence to tie the suspect to the scene. She proposed a bold plan, a targeted re-examination of the park where Emily had disappeared, using modern technology that could detect traces left behind decades earlier. As the investigation gained momentum back in the Thompsons' home, the mood was a mix of anticipation and dread. They had lived in the shadow of their daughter's disappearance for so long that hope felt foreign, almost dangerous. Yet, as they were briefed on the new developments, they dared to imagine a future with answers. In a small, cluttered room filled with memories, Mrs. Thompson held onto a faded photograph of Emily, her heart aching with the weight of what might have been. She whispered softly to the image, a promise to find the truth, no matter the cost. Elsewhere, the genealogist continued her relentless pursuit of connections. her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she navigated the labyrinth of genetic data. The pieces were aligning, each revelation a step closer to unraveling the mystery. But as they edged closer to the truth, Detective Harper received a call that sent a chill down her spine. A deathbed confession had been made at a nearby nursing home. The words, spoken by a man whose life was slipping away, hinted at knowledge of a conspiracy long buried. He claimed to have seen something that day, something that could turn the investigation on its head. As the clock ticked and the shadows lengthened, the team prepared for the next phase. The truth was within reach, but what would it reveal? Would they finally confront the man who had haunted their lives, or would the specter of the past prove more elusive than ever? With each passing moment, the stakes grew higher, the tension more palpable. The stage was set for a confrontation years in the making, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, the Thompsons and the investigators steeled themselves for whatever lay ahead. Detective Harper stood outside the nursing home, the crisp evening air biting at her skin. The weight of the call lingered in her mind, a potential breakthrough, yet fraught with uncertainty. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what she might hear inside. The room was dimly lit, the faint hum of medical machines cutting through the silence. There, lying frail and pale against the sterile white sheets, was Frank Willis, a man whose past had been marked by shadows. His eyes, though clouded with age, held a flicker of urgency as Harper approached. He spoke in a voice barely above a whisper, each word a struggle. He recounted the day Emily vanished, a memory he had buried for decades. He had been a groundskeeper at the park, he said, and on that fateful afternoon, he had witnessed a heated argument between a man and a woman near the playground. It was the sudden silence that followed, the abrupt end to their voices, that had haunted him ever since. Harper listened intently, noting every detail. The man's description was vague, but the guilt in his eyes was unmistakable. He had been too afraid to come forward then, a decision that had tormented him to his last moments. As Harper left the nursing home, the weight of the confession settled over her. It was a small piece, but in a puzzle as vast and complex as this one, every piece mattered. She knew she had to tread carefully, balancing the hope of new leads with the caution of unverified claims. Meanwhile, the genealogist, Anna, was making headway in her own realm. The genetic data was a tangled web of connections, but one thread had caught her attention, a distant relative linked to an unknown branch of the family tree. It was an anomaly, a flicker of possibility that warranted deeper investigation. Anna's fingers moved swiftly over the keyboard, tracing the lineage back through generations, each click bringing her closer to the truth. Her heart raced with the thrill of discovery. This could be the connection they had been waiting for, the link that would unravel the mystery of Emily's disappearance. Back at the precinct, Detective Harper gathered her team. They were on the cusp of a breakthrough, but time was not on their side. With the confession logged and the genetic data analyzed, they had to act swiftly and decisively. The room buzzed with a sense of purpose, the energy palpable. Plans were set in motion to track down the individuals named in Willis's confession and to verify the genetic link Anna had uncovered. It was a race against time, each second ticking away as they moved closer to uncovering the truth. As the night deepened, Harper stood by the window, looking out into the city. The lights flickered like beacons in the darkness, each one a reminder of the lives intertwined in this decades-old mystery. She felt the weight of responsibility, the burden of justice for a family that had waited so long for answers. But as the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, a new sense of determination filled her. They had a glimmer of hope, a path forward. Now, it was up to them to follow it to its end, wherever it might lead. The past was calling, and they were ready to confront it. And so, with renewed resolve, the team prepared for the next chapter in their investigation. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had the promise of resolution. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and they would stop at nothing to find it. As the sun rose over the city, Detective Harper gathered her team in the conference room. The air was thick with anticipation. Hannah's discovery had set off a chain reaction, a cascade of revelations that demanded immediate action. The team huddled around a digital map projected on the wall, red pins marking the locations of individuals connected to the genetic web Anna had painstakingly woven together. Detective Harper pointed to a cluster of pins in a small, quiet suburb just outside the city. This was where the focus of their investigation now lay. Anna's voice was steady but filled with urgency as she explained the breakthrough. The genetic link she had uncovered pointed to a distant relative of Emily's, someone who had been off the radar for years. This individual, a reclusive figure living under a different name, had ties to both the victim's family and the confession they had just received. It was a connection no one had anticipated. Harper's eyes narrowed as she absorbed the information. This was their suspect, the killer in plain sight they had been searching for. The revelation felt like a seismic shift, the pieces of the puzzle finally snapping into place. But they needed more than just a name and location. They needed proof. The team's forensic analyst, a meticulous and methodical man, stepped forward. He had spent the night cross-referencing Anna's genetic data with evidence from the original crime scene, a single strand of hair, preserved but long deemed inconclusive. With advances in DNA technology, he believed they could extract a definitive match, a smoking gun that would tie their suspect to the crime. The room fell silent as the analyst outlined the process. It was intricate, involving advanced sequencing techniques and state-of-the-art equipment. But if successful, it would provide the irrefutable evidence they needed to make an arrest. Detective Harper nodded, her mind racing with the possibilities. This was their chance to finally bring closure to Emily's family, to ensure that justice was served. The tension in the room was palpable, each investigator acutely aware of the stakes. As the team dispersed, Harper placed a call to the district attorney's office. They needed a warrant, and they needed it fast. Every moment counted. The clock was ticking, and each second brought them closer to the truth. Outside, the city was waking up. Cars honked in the distance, and the hum of life resumed. But for Harper and her team, time seemed to stand still. Every action measured, every decision critical. Back in the lab, the forensic analyst worked with precision, his hands steady as he prepared the samples. The room was filled with the hum of machines, the soft click of computer keys as data streamed across screens. It was a race against time, a battle between science and secrecy, with everything hanging in the balance. As the hours passed, the anticipation grew. Harper paced the precinct, her mind a whirl of strategy and contingency plans. They were close, so close to uncovering the truth, but the final piece of the puzzle still eluded them. Then, just as the afternoon sun dipped below the horizon, the analyst emerged, a triumphant look on his face. The DNA match was conclusive. They had their suspect. Harper's heart pounded as she relayed the news to her team. The pieces had come together. The breakthrough they had all hoped for was within reach. But as they moved to apprehend the suspect, one question lingered. Would the suspect confess, or would the truth remain buried in the shadows of the past? The room buzzed with a tense energy as Detective Harper gathered her team. The DNA match had pointed to a name that sent ripples of disbelief through the precinct. It was someone who had been involved in the investigation all along, a trusted figure in the community, someone who had advocated tirelessly for Emily's case to be kept alive. The revelation was both shocking and chilling. Harper's voice was steady, though her heart raced. "We have the warrant. It's time to bring them in." As the team moved swiftly into action, the weight of their discovery settled heavily on their shoulders. It was one thing to suspect a hidden enemy, but to realize the killer had been among them the entire time was a betrayal that stung deeply. The convoy of police vehicles snaked through the city streets, lights flashing but sirens silent, a quiet storm of justice on the move. They arrived at the suspect's residence, a modest, unassuming house that betrayed none of the dark secrets it harbored. Inside, the suspect sat in a dimly lit room, surrounded by mementos of a life lived in the public eye, a carefully crafted facade of normalcy. When Harper knocked on the door, there was no immediate answer, only the sound of footsteps shuffling within. The door opened slowly, revealing the suspect's face, a mask of surprise and calculated calm. Harper presented the warrant, her eyes meeting theirs with a mix of determination and weariness. There was no struggle, no denial. The suspect simply nodded, as though some part of them had been expecting this moment all along. Back at the precinct, the interrogation room was stark and cold, the air thick with anticipation. Harper and her partner entered, the door clicking shut behind them. They sat across from the suspect, a table the only thing separating truth from deception. "Why?" Harper asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the question hanging in the air like a spectre. The suspect's eyes flickered, a moment of vulnerability breaking through their stoic facade. "It was never supposed to happen," they began, their voice a haunting echo of regret. "Emily, she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Harper leaned in, pressing gently but firmly. "But you were part of the search, part of the community effort to find her. Why continue the charade?" The suspect sighed, a heavy, resigned sound. "Guilt. Fear. It eats at you, you know? I thought if I helped, if I stayed close to the case, maybe I could make up for what happened. But it was never enough." The confession hung in the air, a moment of raw truth that left the room silent. Harper felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a flicker of pity for the tortured soul before her. Outside, the precinct was alive with activity, the news of the arrest spreading quickly. Emily's family had been notified. Their long-awaited closure was finally within reach. As the suspect was led away, Harper watched them go, her mind a whirl of thoughts. This chapter was closing, but the scars would remain, a reminder of the darkness that had lurked in their midst. As the door to the interrogation room swung shut, Harper knew that the end was near, but the story was far from over. There was still much to unravel, many questions to answer, and the world was watching, waiting to see how the final act would play out. The precinct buzzed with an electric tension, every officer aware that they stood on the precipice of resolution. Harper, deep in thought, made her way to the lab where the forensic team had been working tirelessly. It was here that the breakthrough had begun to take shape, and it was here that the threads of this tangled web would finally be unraveled. The lead forensic scientist, Dr. Ellis, met Harper with a nod of understanding. "We've been diving deep into the archives," she explained, her voice steady yet tinged with excitement. "Re-examining everything with fresh eyes and new technology." Harper's mind flashed back to the early days of the investigation, the countless dead ends and false leads. "What changed?" she asked, the weight of years of searching evident in her voice. "DNA," Ellis replied simply, but the word carried the promise of answers. "We've reprocessed evidence using advanced techniques unavailable in the 90s. The samples we have, some hair fibers from the crime scene, have given us a partial profile." Harper's heart quickened. "And what did you find?" Ellis led her to a workstation where a computer screen displayed a series of complex genetic codes. "We cross-referenced this with databases that didn't exist back then. We found a familial match, not a direct hit, but close enough to warrant further investigation." The room seemed to close in around Harper as she processed the information. "A family member?" she asked, the implications swirling in her mind. "Yes," Ellis confirmed, her eyes serious. "The suspect's cousin. It led us to them and everything started to click. Their presence at the search efforts, their connections, their ability to blend in." Harper nodded, the puzzle pieces aligning in her mind. "We always knew the killer was someone who knew the area, someone who could move without suspicion." Ellis continued. "Once we had the cousin, we dug deeper into the suspect's background. Financial records, movements, associations, all leading back to that fateful day." As Harper absorbed this, the tension in the air shifted. They were nearing the truth, the culmination of years of heartbreak and relentless pursuit. But the question remained, why had the suspect committed such a heinous act? "We've got one more thing," Ellis said, leading Harper to a set of photographs. These were taken at a local community event, just after Emily disappeared. "Look at the background." Harper squinted at the images, her breath catching as she recognized a familiar face, half hidden in the crowd. The suspect, their expression unreadable, watching the proceedings with a detachment that now seemed chilling. "It was right there all along," Harper murmured, the realization settling over her like a shroud. The killer in plain sight. The gravity of the moment bore down on her. They were close to closure, but the final confrontation loomed ahead. Every step taken, every revelation uncovered, had led them to this point. As Harper left the lab, the sun dipping below the horizon, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. The past was about to collide with the present, and the truth, however painful, would soon be known. The world was watching, and the final act was about to begin. The evening air was thick with anticipation as Harper made her way to the precinct. The streets seemed quieter than usual, as if the city itself was holding its breath in the moments before the storm. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of purpose. Officers moved with a determined urgency, knowing that the end of a long, arduous journey was finally within reach. Harper found Ellis in the conference room, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop. The photographs they had pored over earlier were spread out across the table, each image a fragment of a larger, darker mosaic. Harper took a seat, her mind racing with the implications of their discovery. "We've confirmed everything," Ellis said, her voice steady but tinged with the weight of what was to come. "The suspect's name is Gerald Turner. He's been a fixture in the community for years, active in local charities, involved in the neighborhood watch, even gave safety talks to schools." Harper shook her head, the dichotomy between Turner's outward persona and his dark secret, almost too much to fathom. "All the while hiding in plain sight," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Exactly," Ellis replied. His connection to Emily's family was distant enough to avoid suspicion initially, but close enough to allow him to operate under the radar. He knew the routines, the vulnerabilities. Harper leaned in closer, her curiosity piqued. "And the breakthrough with the financial records?" Ellis nodded, pulling up a series of transactions on her screen. Turner made several large cash withdrawals in the weeks following Emily's disappearance. "We traced the funds to an offshore account, likely used to cover his tracks." Harper's mind drifted back to the community event in the photographs, the image of Turner's detached expression etched in her memory. He was living a double life, she mused. But why? What was his motive? Ellis hesitated for a moment as if weighing her words. "We're still piecing that together. But there's something else. A journal. We found it during our search of his property. It's filled with entries that suggest a deep-seated obsession with control, with power. Emily was just convenient." The revelation was like a punch to the gut. Harper felt a cold anger rising within her. He took everything from her family, and then he just carried on. Ellis met her gaze, her expression resolute. "But not anymore. We've put everything in place. The arrest is set for tomorrow morning. We'll approach him at his office. It's the safest way. We have to be careful, Harper. He's eluded us for so long. We can't afford any mistakes." Harper nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The countdown had begun, the final pieces of the puzzle falling into place. As she left the precinct, the city lights flickering in the distance, a single question lingered in her mind. What would Turner do when faced with the truth? The clock ticked steadily towards dawn, the promise of justice hanging in the balance. The morning air was crisp, the sky a muted palette of blues and greys as officers quietly gathered outside Turner's office building. Harper stood amongst them, her heart a drumbeat of anticipation and anxiety. The plan was precise, every detail meticulously orchestrated to ensure Turner's arrest went smoothly. At exactly 9 a.m. they moved in. Turner was at his desk, the pristine office a testament to his meticulously curated facade. When the officers entered, he looked up, surprise flickering briefly across his face before being replaced by a mask of composure. As they approached, Harper could almost see the calculations turning in his mind, the realization of his unraveling life dawning slowly. "Mr. Turner, you're under arrest for the kidnapping and presumed murder of Emily Harris," the lead officer stated, his voice steady, unyielding. Turner, his hands cuffed, said nothing. As they led him away, Harper caught a glimpse of something in his eyes, perhaps resignation or a flicker of defiance. The office was silent, the only sound the measured footsteps echoing down the corridor. In the interrogation room, Turner sat across from Harper and Ellis, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on his face. For hours, they pressed him, unraveling the tangled web of lies and deceit. Turner remained silent, his lips a thin line, until Harper placed the journal on the table, opening it to a particularly damning entry. It was a confession of sorts, not explicit, but enough to break the silence. Turner's voice, when it came, was calm, almost detached. "I never meant for it to go so far," he began, his words chilling in their simplicity. "Emily, she was supposed to be a statement, a demonstration of control, but then things spiraled." As he spoke, the room seemed to close in, the air thick with the weight of his revelations. He described how he had watched Emily, how he had waited for the perfect moment, how he had taken her, and then, in a moment of panic and clarity, realized he could never let her go. The truth spilled out, each word a nail in his coffin. The trial was swift, the evidence overwhelming. The journal, the financial records, the testimonies, it painted a picture too vivid to ignore. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a guilty verdict. Turner was sentenced to life in prison, the gavels echo a final punctuation to his decades-long deception. For Emily's family, the resolution was bittersweet. They had their answers, but the years lost could never be reclaimed. Her mother, now grey-haired and weary, spoke at the sentencing, her voice a poignant blend of sorrow and strength. "Emily was taken from us, her life a bright flame snuffed out too soon. But today we reclaim her story. Today we find some measure of peace. The community, once fractured by suspicion and grief, began the slow process of healing." Vigils were held in Emily's memory, her story a somber reminder of the darkness that can hide in plain sight. In the months that followed, Harper found herself reflecting often on the case, on the fragile nature of justice and memory. She sat at her desk, the city skyline a familiar silhouette against the dusk. The path to truth had been long and fraught with challenges, but as she penned the final lines of her report, a sense of closure washed over her. Justice had been served, albeit belatedly. Emily's name was no longer a question, but a testament to resilience and the relentless pursuit of truth. And though the scars lingered, they were a part of the tapestry, a reminder of the past, a guide for the future. Harper closed her laptop, her thoughts a quiet reflection on the power of memory and the enduring quest for justice. It was a journey that had begun with a chance discovery, a thread pulled from the fabric of time, and ended with the light of truth banishing the shadows. In the end, Emily was more than a cold case. She was a symbol of hope, of persistence, and of the unyielding strength of those who refused to forget.